Why do some people spend $5,000 on a purse and some people won't spend $50? It's because value is not real. Every price that you see in the economy is just a reflection of what's inside of humans. Humans create value from their opinions. And just like none of the goods or assets in our economy have an intrinsic value, neither does our money. Our money is actually just a tool that's used to measure like the median of all this subjective value that's in our economy. All value comes from humans. Likewise, all money comes from humans. It's not actually real until a human believes it's real. Let's check out the whiteboard. I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right. So here we have three different persons. Person A, B, and C, where person A is a rancher, person B is a fashionista, person C is a prepper. And the abstract consensus line isn't drawn yet. So that's our key, and then I'll explain this graph here that we got. So on the x-axis, going across the bottom here, we have different goods. So we have a truck, a suit, some boba tea, some Bitcoin, some Jordan shoes, and tomatoes. Those represent our goods that we're kind of using to illustrate this point that I'm making. And then the y-axis is showing the subjective value that each one of these persons places upon each of these goods in the economy. Now I want to point out that this is just for illustrative purposes only. I don't know what these people's true subjective value is, but it's going to be useful for illustrating my point. So person A, we'll look at them real quick. We're going to go over each one. Person A is a rancher. They value having a truck because that's a useful tool for them on their ranch. And then a suit, not so much. They don't really care about boba. And Bitcoin, maybe, because that's building long-term capital for their structures and their business and for their ranch. They don't really care about Jordans because they're not really like a utility that they can use. Maybe they want, they probably value some good working boots better. And tomatoes. Well, maybe they grow tomatoes on their ranch and, utilize that crop. So that's maybe important to them. Person B, though, the fashionista, they could care less about a truck. They're not going to be spending their money on that. They don't value that. A suit, though, man, they want to be looking good, so they're gonna put a lot of value on that suit, and you gotta have the boba going with the suit. Bitcoin, in this case, maybe not as much because this fashionista isn't very forward-looking potentially. They're thinking about the present moment more so they're not trying to build any sort of long-term capital or storage of their wealth. Jordans, though, man, you gotta get those so you're looking fly. And tomatoes, it's way down here. It just kind of cut through my key here, so they don't really give a crap about tomatoes at all. And then person C, the prepper, they have a little more preference for the truck over the fashionista. They don't really care about a suit either. And boba, that's kind of like the last thing on their list. But Bitcoin, they're seeing that as a huge store of value, and they understand that it will survive any sort of world catastrophe. So, they're all in on Bitcoin. Jordans, again, not a whole lot of utility. That's not going to be useful in a prepper situation. Tomatoes, though, that's good because, especially for seeds, you can grow crops with those. So the point of all this, though, is that value in the marketplace across all goods is very subjective. And where does that value come from? It comes from the person that is valuing that specific good. Now, of course, in a real economy, we have way more than just 6 goods. We have, probably millions and millions of goods that people can attribute their value to. They can place their own personal judgments and opinions on what they value and what goods that they want to acquire. So if you can kind of try to visualize this in your head, imagine the chart that I just showed you, except for there's all the people in the world. all the billions of people in the world, and they all have their own personal values that they attribute to any good in the economy. And it's just this crazy chart that's all over the place. What happens is that energy, or that value that's placed upon all of the goods in the economy, collapses down to essentially like an average or a mean of all of the subjective value of all the people that are participating in the economy. That is what this abstract consensus line represents on the graph now. It represents the median area of all of the combined value across the entire economy. Now, that is not anything tangible that we can truly see or touch. That's just something that humans created, and it exists in the entire economy. But what we do with that is we try to measure it. There's some sort of base economic unit of value that exists among all of humanity and in specific economies that we try to measure. And what do we measure that with? It's some sort of ethereal thing. It's not real. We can't touch it. We can't actually truly measure it because it's too abstract. Well, we attempt to measure that unit of value with money. Money actually arises naturally in a society to fill this gap of differing values that each human has in the economy. It eliminates the need to barter with each other because we now have a common tool that we can use to trade with. Now if we take our abstract consensus line and zoom in on it and kind of break it up into what we'll call these value units. They are units of economic value assigned by everyone in the economy. And remember, these are the units that are super abstract. Like, we can't actually know what these are, but it just naturally arises in society. And so what do we measure that with? We actually measure it with money. Money becomes our unit of account for measuring subjective value in the economy. Just like a ruler is used to measure length, our money is used to measure the number of units of economic value in our society. Pretty cool, right? Have you ever thought about money that way before? This is a perfect lead up to start talking about unit of account on a deeper level. How do we price things? Why do we price things like that? I'll be talking about that in tomorrow's video. So go ahead and follow me so you don't miss it. And remember, Bitcoin is the future. It's an opportunity for everyone.